Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host Asaran, and welcome one and welcome all. Let's make this a good one. Yeah. Right, so I just need to do some basic preparations. Damn it. I got hit by a splinter. When cutting armor plates today. The weather-beaten trail wound ahead into the dust-racked climbs of the barren land which dominate large portion of the Norgolian Empire. Age-worn hoofprints smother the shifting sands of time, shone dully against the dust-splattered crust of the earth. The tireless sun cast its parching rays of incandescence from overhead, halfway through its daily revolution. I can't read apparently. Small rodents scampered about, occupying themselves in the daily accomplishment of their dismal lives. They sprayed over three heaving mounds in blinding clouds, while they board some cargoes of their struggling overseers. Prepare to embrace your crater in the Stygian haunts of hell, barbarian. Only after you have kissed the fleeting steed of death, wretch. A sweeping blade of steel riveted from the massive barbarian hide enameled shield as his ripping right arm thrust forth, sending a steel-shod blade to the hilt into one of the soldier's vital organs. Then the disemboweled mercenary crumpled from his saddle and sank to the cloud sward, sprinkling the parched dust with crimson droplets of escaping life fluid. The enthused barbarian swiveled about, his shock of fiery red hair tossing robustly in the humid air current as he faced the attack of defeated soldier's fellow in arms. "Damn you, barbarian!" shrieked the soldiers as he observed his comrade in death. A gleaming scimitar smote a heavy blow against the renegade's spiked helmet, bringing a heavy cloud over the accordion's mist brain, shaking off the effects of the pounding blow to his head. Grigner brought down his scarlet-streaked edge against the soldier's crudely forged hauberk, clanging harmlessly to the left side of his opponent. The soldier's steed whined as he directed the horse back from the driving blade of the barbarian. Grigner leashed his mount forward as the hoarsely piercing battle cry of his wilderness broad race resounded from his grinding lungs. A twirling blade bounced harmless from the mighty thief's buckler as his rolling right arm cleft upwards, sending a foot of blinding steel ripping through the Cimmerian's exposed gullet. A gasping gurgle from the soldier's writhing mouth as it tumbled to the golden sand at his feet and warmed agonizingly in his deathbed. Whoa, this is some heavy stuff, dude. Holy crap. Grigny's emerald orb glared lustfully at the wallowing soldier struggling before his chestnut-swelled mount. His scolding voice reverberated over the dying form in a tone of mocking mirth. You city-bred dog should learn not to antagonize your brother. Reining his weary mount ahead, Grigny resumed his journey to the Norregolian city of Gorsam, hoping to discover wine, woman, and adventure to boil the wild blood coursing through his savage veins. The trek to Gorsam was forced upon Grigner when the soldiers of Kryn were leashed upon him by faithless concubine he had wooed. His scandalous activities throughout the Cimmerian city has unleashed throngs of havoc and uproar among its refined patricians, leading them to tack a heavy reward on his head. He had barely managed to escape through the back entrance of the inn. He had been guzzling in as a squad of soldiers touched upon him. After spilling a spout of blood from the leader of the mercenary as he dismembered one of the officer's arms, he retreated to his mount to make his way towards Gorsum, rumoured to contain haunts of plunder and many young wenches for any man who has the backbone to wrestle them away. Arriving after dusk in Gorsum, Grignir descended down a dismal alley, reining his horse before a beaten tavern. The red-haired giant strode into the dimly lit hostelry, reeking of foul odours and cheap wine. The air was heavy with choking fumes spewing from smouldering torches encased within Fenden's earthen-packed walls. Tables were clustered with groups of drunken thieves and cutthroats, tossing dice or making love to willing prostitutes. Eyeing a slender female crouched alone on a nearby bench, Grignir advanced, wishing to wholesomely occupy his time. The flickering torches cast weird shafts of luminescence dancing over the half-naked harlot of his choice. Her stringy orchid twines of hair sprang gracefully over the lithe opaque nose as he raised the half-drained mug to her pale red lips. Glancing upward, the alluring complexion noted the stalwart giant as he rapidly approaches. A faint glimmer sparked from a pair of deep blue ovals of the amorous female as she motioned towards Grignir, excited him to join her. The barbarian seated himself upon a stool at the wench's side, exposing his body naked save from a loincloth, brandishing a long steel broadsword, an iron spiral battle helmet, and thick leather sandals to her unobstructed view. "Thou hast needed to occupy your time, barbarian?" questioned the female. "Only if something worth offering is within my reach," stated Grignir as his hand crept to embrace the tempting female, who welcomed them with an open willingness. "From where do you come, barbarian, and by what are you called?" gasped the complying wenches. Grignir smote her lips with blazing touch of his flaming mouth. The engrossed titan ignored the queries of the inquisitive female, pulling her towards him, crushing her sagging nipples to his yearning chest. Without struggle, she gave in, winding her soft arms and harshly bronze hide of Grignir corded shoulder blades as his calloused hands caressed her firm protruding bust. "You'll make love to me, wench," admitted Grignir as he reached for the vessel of potent wine his charge had been quaffing. A flying foot caught the mug. Grignir had taken hold of Senning's blood-red content, sloshing over a flicking crescent, leashing tongues of bright orange flame foot trodden floor. "Remove yourself from yourself, Sarah. The wench belongs to me," blabbered a drunken soldier, far too consumed by the influence of his vile brew to take note of the superior size of his adversary. Grignir lithely bound from the startled female, his face lit up to ashen red ferocity, and eyes locked a searing feral blaze towards the swaying soldier. "To hell with you, braggart!" bellowed the enraged accordion as he swiftly hefted his finely honed broadsword. The staggering soldier clumsily reached towards the pommel of his dangling sword, but before his hand could ever touch the oaken hilt, a silver flash was slicing the heavy air. The thieves of savage lashing right arm bulged from glistening bronze hide as the blade bit deep into the soldier's neck, lopping off the confused head of his senseless tormentor. With a nauseating thud, the severed oval topped to the floor, as a segregated toss of Grignir bovine antagonists swayed, then collapsed in a pool of swirled crimson. In the confusion, the soldier fellows confronted Grignir with unsheathed cutlasses, directed towards the latter's scowling makeup. The slut should have picked his quarry more carefully, roared Victor in a mocking baritone growl, as he whipped his dripping blade from the prostrate form and returned it to its scabbard. The fool should have shown more prudence, however, you shall rule your action while in the rotting pits, stated one of the sprawled soldier's comrades. Grignir's hand began to move from his blade from leather housing, but retarded the motion in face of blades waving before his face. Dismiss your hand from the hilt, barbarian, or you shall find a foot of steel sheeted in your gizzard. Grignir waited his position, observing his plight, whereupon he took the soldier's advice as the only logical choice. To attempt to hack away from his present predicament would only warrant certain death. He was of no mind to bring upon his own demise if an alternate path presented itself. The will to necessitate his life forced him to yield to the superior force in hopes of a moment of carelessness later, upon the parts of his captors, in which he could effect a more plausible means of escape. You may steady your arms. I will go without a struggle. Your decision is a wise one, yet perhaps you would have been better off if you had forced death. The soldier winkled a sadistic grin of knowing mirth as he prodded his prisoners on his sword point. After an indiscriminate period of marching through the sinking alleyways and dim moonlighted streets, the procession confronted a massive sergaleo. The palace area was surrounded by iron grating, with a lush garden upon all sides. The group was admitted through the gilded gateway, and Grignir was led along a stone pathway bordered by plush vegetation, lustfully enhanced by the moon's shimmering rays. Upon reaching the palace, the group was granted entrance, and several minutes of explanation led through several winding corridors to a richly draped chamber. Confronting the group was a short, stocky man, seated upon a golden throne. Tapestry of richly draped regal blue silk covered all the walls of the chamber, while the steed's steps leading to the throne were plated with sparkling white ivory. The man upon the throne had a naked wench seated at each of his arms, and a trusted advisor seated in back of him. At each corner of the chamber, a guard stood at attention with upraised pikes, supported in their hands, a golden chainmail adoring the torso, and barred helmets emitting scarlet plumes enshrouded their heads. The man rose from his throne to the dais surrounding it. His plush turquoise robe dangled loosely from his chunky frame. The soldiers around Grigner fell to their knees, heads bowed to the stone masonry of the floor in fearful dignity of their sovereign liege. "Explain the purpose of this intrusion upon my chateau." "Your sincerity replenished in noble grandeur. We have brought you this yokel before you, for redress of all knowing wisdom in judgment regarding his fate." "Down on your knees, lout, and pay proper homage to your sovereign," commanded the pudgy noble of Grigner. "By the surely birds of Grigner kneel to no man. Or rather, by the surly birds of Mirvig Grigner kneels to no man." You dare to deal this blasphemous act to me? You are indeed a brave one, stranger, yet your valor smacks of foolishness. I find you to be the only fool sitting on your pompous throne, enhancing the rolling flaps of your belly in the midst of your elaborate luxury, and the soul stand luxury. The soldier standing at Grigner's side smote him heavily in the face with the flat of his swords, cutting short to the harsh word and knocking his battered helmet to the masonry with an echoing clang. The poncy noble sagged, round face flushed suddenly pale, then pastily lit up to a lustrous cherry-red radiance. His lips trembled with a malicious rage, while emitting a muffled, sibilant gibberish. His sagging flabs rolled like tubs of upset jelly. When compressed, he suckled in his gut in an attempt to conceal his softness. The prince regained his statue, then spoke to the soldiers around Grigner, his face unconforming into an ugly expression of sadistic humor. "Take this uncut heathen to the vault of misery, and be sure that his agonies are long and drawn out before death can release him." "As you wish, sire, your command shall be heeded immediately," answered the soldier to the right of Grigner. Grigner. As his arm stared into the barbarian's seemingly unaffected face. The advisor seated into the back of the noble slowly rose to advance to the side of his master. Motioning the benches at his side to remove themselves, he lowered his head and whispered to the noble. Eminence, the punishment you have decreed will cause much misery to this scum. Yet it will last only a short time, then release him to a land beyond the suffering of the human body. Why not mellow him into one of the subterranean vaults for a few days? Then send him to life in one of your buried mines, to one such as he. A life spent in the confinement of a Stygian pit will be an infinitely more appropriate, lasting torture. The noble cupped his drooping chin in the folds of his brimming palm, meditating a moment upon the rationality of the counsellor's words. Then raised his shaggy brow and eyebrows turned towards the adviser, eyes aglow. As always, Guffend, you speak of great wisdom. Your word brings great knowledge concerning the nature of one such as he, saith the king. The noble turned towards the prisoner with a noticeable shimmer reflecting in his frog-like eyes, and his lips contorting with a greasy grin. I have decided to void my previous decree. The prisoner shall be removed to one of the palace's underground walls. There he shall stay until I have decided he is sufficiently shimmered, whereupon he is allowed to spend the remainder of his days at the labour in one of my mines. Jeez. Oh, this is quite a story. Upon hearing this, Grigner realized his fate would be far less merciful than death. To one such as he, who is used to roaming the countryside at will, a life of confinement would be more than his body and mind could stand up to. This type of life would be immeasurably worse than death. I shall never understand the ways of your twisted civilization. I simply defended my honor, and I'm condemned to life in confinement by a pig who sits on his royal ass, wowing horse, and knows nothing of the affairs of the land he imagines to rule. Lectured Grignir. Enough of this. Away with the slut before I lose my control. Oh gosh. The grand cliché of all clichés. Seeing the perils of his position, Grignir searched for an opening, crushing prudence to the sword. He plowed into the soldiers as he left, taking hold of his sword, and bounding to the dais, supporting the prince before the startled guard could regain his composure. Agafnd leapt Grignir and his sire, but found a sword blade permeating permeating the length of his ribs before he could loosen his weapons. The councillor slumped to his knees as Gregner slid his crimson blade from Agafen's ribcage. The fat prince stood undulating in insurmountable fears. Before the edge of fiery maned comet, his flabs of jelly. Before the edge of the fiery maned comet, his flabs of jellied blubber pulsating to and fro in ripples of flowing terror. "Where is your wisdom and power now, your majesty?" growled Gregner. The prince went rigid as Gregner discerned him gazing over his soldier. He swiveled to a note the cause of the noble's attention, raising his sword over his head and prepared to leash the vicious downward cleft. But he fell short as the shaft of a steel-rimmed pike clashed against his unguarded skull. The blackness of solitude, silence, shrouded him in ever peaceful reigned supreme. "Before me, sirrah, before me as always. Ha 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 ha," the noble cackled. Consciousness returned to Gregner as the stigmatic pools of his mind gradually cleared the cobwebs of cluttering in its inner recess. Yet the Stygian cloud of chakral ebony remained, an incompatible shield of dark blackness, enhanced by the bleak absence of sound. Gregner's muddled brain reeled from the shock of the blow he had received to the base of his skull. The events leading to his predicament were slow to filter back to him. He had declared with emotion that he was dead, and descended or sunk, however. It may be to the shadow land beyond the aperture of the grave. But rejected this hypothesis when his memory shifted back within his grips. This was not the land of the dead. It was something infinitely more precarious than anything the grave could offer. Death promised an infinity of peace, not the finite misery of the inactive life of confined torture, forever concealed from the life-bearing shafts of the beloved rising sun. The orbit has been taken for granted, yet now cherished above all else, to be forever refused further glimpses of the snow-capped summits of the land of his birth. Never again to witness the thrilling plundering unexplored lands beyond the crest of a bleeding horizon. And perhaps the worst of all, the denial to ever encompass the lustful excitement of caressing the naked curves of the body of a trim young wench. This was indeed the buried chasm of hell concealed within the inner depths of the palace, despised interior. A fearful ebony chamber, devised to drive the brinks of insanity to the mind of the unfortunate condemned. Through the inept solitude of a limbo of listless, dreary silence. A tightly wrung elliptical circle of torches cast the wavering shaft, prancing morbidly over the smooth surface of a rectangular rigid altar. Expertly chiseled from the grotesque forms of grotesque gargoyles, graced the oblique rim of protubrating lengths of the grim, orifice of death, staring forever ahead into nothingness. In complete ignorance of the bloody rites enacted in their presence, brown flaking stain decorated the golden surface of the ring surrounding the altar, which banked a small slit in the lower right-hand corner of the altar. The slit stood above a crudely pounded pail, which had several silver meshed chalices hanging at the side. Dangling at the rim of golden mallet, the handle of which was engraved with image of twisted faces, grooved at its far end with slots designed for snug hand grip. The head of the mallet was slightly larger than a clenched fist, and shaped into a smooth oval mass. And encircling the marble altar was a congregation of leering shaman, eerie chanting of a bygone age. Originating unknown aeons before the memory of man were being uttered from the buried recesses of the acolytes' deep lungs. Orange paint was smeared in generous globules over the top of the wrinkled shaven scalps, while golden rings projected from the lobes of their pink ears. Ornate robes of luscious purple satin enclosed the bulging torso, and attached around the waist with silver silk lashed the ebony buckles the shape of more so shapen skulls. Screw this dictionary. Dangling around her necks were old-fashioned medallions, held by thin gold chains, featuring in the centers blood-red rubies, which resembled crimson fetish eyeballs, cushioning their bare feet with plush red felt slippers, with pointed golden pikes projecting from their tips. Situated in front of the altar and directly adjacent to the copper pail was a massive jade idol, a misshapen hideous bust of the shaman's pagan deity. The shimmering green idol was placed in a sitting posture on an ornately carved golden throne raised upon a round dvory-plated dais, its bulging arms and webbed hands resting on the paddle arms of the seat. Its head was intertwined in golden snake-like coils, hanging over its oblong ears, which tapered off into thin hollow points. Its nose was a bulging triangular mass of sunken in at its side with toe-gaping nostrils. Dramatic beneath the nostrils was a twisted, shaggy lipped mouth, giving the impression of a slobbering, sadistic grimace. What do you mean, slobbering? Yeah. At the foot of the heathen deity, a slender, pale-faced female naked but for a golden jewel harness enshrouding her huge outcropping breast, supporting long silver laces which extended to her thigh, stood before the pearl-white field with noticeable shivers travelling up and down the length of her exquisitely moulded body. Her lips, delicate limbs trembled beneath the soft, narrow hands as she attempted to conceal herself from the piercing stare of the ambivalent idol. All is not very good water. But hey, I got it delivered, so I might as well drink it. Oh man, this text is a pain on my throat. Glaring directly down towards was a stony cycloptic face of the bloated deity, gaping from its single oblate socket. For a single oblate socket was scintillating, many-faceted scarlet emerald. A brilliant gem seeming to possess a life of its own. A priceless gleaming stone, capable of domineering the wealth of conquering empires, the Eye of Argon. All knowledge of measuring time has escaped Grignr. When a person is derived of the sun, moon, and the stars, he loses all conception of time as he had previously understood it. It seemed that years had passed if time were measured by terms of misery and mental anguish. Yet he estimated that he had only been a few days in length. He had slept 3 times and had been fed 5 times since his awakening in a crypt. However, when the action of the bodies are restricted, its needs are also affected. The need for nourishment and slumber are directly proportional to the function of the body has performed. Meaning that when free and active, Grignr become hungry every 6 hours, and witness the desire for sleep every 15 hours. Whereas upon his present condition he may encounter the need for food every 10 hours, and the want for rest every 20 hours. All methods he had before depended upon were extinct in a dismal pit. Hence he may have been imprisoned for 10 minutes or 10 years. He did not know, resulting in disheartened emotion from deep within his being. The food, if you can honor the mouldering. The moulding lumps of fetid mush. To that extent was borne to him by 2 gods who opened a portal at the top of his enclosure and shoved it to him in wooden bowls, retrieving the food and water bowl from his previous meal at the same time. I wished they threw back the bolts of the iron latch and returned to their other duties, since deprived of all other means of nourishment. Grignr was impelled to eat the tainted slop in order to ward off the pangs of starvation, though as he stuffed it into his mouth with his filthy fingers and struggled to force it down his throat. He imagined it was that which has been spurned by the hounds of station various segments of the palace. There was little in the barren vault that could occupy his body or mind. He had paced out the length and width of the enclosure time and time again, and tested every granite slab which consisted of the walls of the prison in hopes of finding a hidden passage to freedom, all which was to no avail, other than to keep him busy and distracted, his mind from wandering to thoughts of what he believed was his future. He had memorized the number of strides from one end to the other of the cell, and knew the exact number of slabs which made a bleak dungeon. Numerous schemes were introduced and alternately discarded in turn, as they succored to unravel him of no means of escape which stood the slightest chance of success. Anguish continued to mount as a means of occupation were rapidly exhausted. Suddenly, without thrive, he was routed from his contemplation, as he detected a faint scratching sound at the end of the crypt opposite him. The sound seemed to be caused by something trying to scrape away at the granite blocks the floor the enclosure consisted of. The sandy scratching of something like an animal's claw. Grigner gradually groped his way to the other end of the vault, carefully feeling his way along with his hand ahead of him. When a few inches off from wall, a loud, perpetrating squeal from the scampering of small padded feet reverberated from the walls of the roughly hewn heaven chamber. Grigner threw his hands up to shield his face and flung himself backwards upon his buttocks. A fussy form bounded to his hairy chest, burying its talon in his flesh while gnashing towards his throat with its grinding white teeth, its sour-fetid breath scorching the squirming barbarian's dilating nostrils. Grigner grappled with the lashing flex or muscle of the repugnant body of a garganuan brown-hide rat, striving to hold his race of teeth from its juicy jugular, as his beady grey organs of sight glazed into the flaring emeralds of its prey. Oh my. Taking hold of the rodent around his lean, growling stomach with both hands, Grigner pried it from his crimson rent breast, removing small patch of flayed flesh from his chest in the motion between the quailed black claws of the soaring beast, holding the rodent at arm's length. He cupped his right hand over his throtting face, concentrating his fingers into vice-like fist over the quivering head. Retaining his grip upon the rat, the Grigner fleshed his outstretched arms, with slowly twisting his right hand clockwise and his left hand counterclockwise motion. The rodent let out a tortured squall, drawing scarlet as his violent dug into his foam-flecked fangs into the barbarian's sweating palms, causing his face to contort into an ugly grimace as he cursed beneath his breath. Ooh, this is a handful. With a loud crack, the rodent's potted head from his squirming torso, sending out a sprinkling shower of crimson gore, trailing a slimy string of disjointed vertebrae, snapped trachea, esophagus and jugular, disjointed hyoid bone, muscle pearl stretched hide, and blood-seared muscle. Is it graphic enough for you? Oh God. Flinging the broken body to the floor, Grignus shook his blood-streaked hands and whipped them against his thigh until dry. Then wiped blood that had showered his face from his eyes. Again sitting himself up on the jagged floor, he prepared to once more revamp his glum meditation. He told himself that as long as he still breathed the gas of life through his lungs, hope was not lost. He told himself this, but found it hard to comprehend in his gloomy surroundings. Yet he was still alive. His bulging sinews at their peaks of marvel, his struggling mind floating in a myriad of impressed excellence of the thought. Plot after plot sifted through his mind in energetic contemplation. Yeah, this is why you need an editor. And a proofreader. Or both. Then it hit him. Minutes may have passed in silent thought or days. He could not tell, but he stumbled at last upon a plan that he considered as holding a slight margin of plausibility. He might die in the attempt, but he knew he would not submit without a final bloody struggle. It was not a foolproof plan, yet it built upon the store of renewed vortexed energy. His overwrought soul thought he might perish in the execution of the escape. He would still be escaping the life of infinite torture in the store for him. Either way, he would still cheat the gloating prince of succored revenge in his sadistic mind craved so dearly. The guard would soon come to bear him, offer to the prince buried mines of dread, giving him the sought-after opportunity to execute his newly formulated plan. Groping his way along the rough floor, Grigney found his tool in a pool of congealed gore. The carcass of the decapitated rodent, the tool that the very filth he had been sentenced to spawned. And time came for action. He would have to be prepared, so he set himself to rending the stickly hulk in grime silence, searching by the touch of his fingertips for the lever to freedom. Upon the altar, and be done with it, wench, ordered a fidgeting shaman, who gave the female a grim stare, accompanied by wrinkling of his lips in a mirthful grin of delight. The girl burst into a slow, steady whimper, stood shakily to her knees, cringing woefully from the priest. With both arms wound snake-like around the bulging jade chin, rising before her scantily attired figure. Her face was redly inflamed from the salty flow of tears, spouting from her glassy, dilated eyeballs. With short, heavy footfalls, the priest approached the female, his piercing stare never wavering from her quivering young countenance, Halting before the terrified girl, he projected his arm outwards and motioned her to arise in an upward movement of his hand. The girl's whimpering increased slightly as she sunk closer to the floor, rather than arising. The flickering torches outlined her trim build and weird ornate glow, as it cast a ghostly shadow dancing in horrid waves of splendor over smoothly worn whiteness of the marble-hewn altar. The shaman's lips curled back further, exposing a set of blackened, decaying molars which transformed his slovenly grin into a wildly greasy arc of sadistic mirth, and alternately interposed into the female a strong sensation of stomach-curdling nausea. "Have it as you will, female," gloated the enhanced priest as he bent over at the waist, projecting his ape-like arms forwards, and clasped the female's slender arms with his hairy round fist. In an inward surge of his biceps, he harshly jerked the trembling girl to her feet, and smothered her salty wet cheeks with the mouldy touch of his decrepit dull red lips. The wild stench of the shaman's hot-fetid breath overcame the nauseated female with a deep, soul-searing sickness, causing her to wrench her head backwards in regurgitated, slimy, orange-white stream of snivelling gore, a richly woven purple robe of the encased acolyte. Oh. The wild stench of the shaman's hot, fetid breath overcame the nauseated female. So, regurgitated a slimy orange and white. Okay, so she puked. Okay. The priest's lips trembled with a malicious rage as he removed the callous paw from the girl's arm and replaced them with tightly around her undulating neck, shaking her violently through and through. The girl gasped a tortured groan from her clamped lungs, her sea blue eyes bulging forth from damp sockets. Cocking her right foot forward, she leashed it, desperate outward with strength of a demon possessed, lodging her sandal foot squarely between the shaman's testicles. You're not very good at your job, are you? The starlit priest released his crushing grip, crimping his body over at the waist, overlooking his recessed belly wide open in a deep chasm. His face flushed to a rose-red shade of crimson, eyelid fluttering wide with the eyeballs protruding blindly outwards from the sockets to the outmost perimeters, while his lips quivered wildly about, allowing antagonized swell of gust forth as his breath billowed from burning lungs. His hands reached out, clutching his urinary glands, as his knees wobbled rapidly about for a few seconds, then buckled, causing the ruptured shaman to collapse in an egg-huddled mass to the granite pavement, rolling helplessly about in his agony. The pathetic screeches of the shaman, growling in dejected misery upon the hand-hewn granite-laid pavement, worn smoothly by countless hours of arduous sweat and toil, as a welter of ichor oozing through his clenched hands, attracts the perturbed attention of his comrade from their fetid ululations. The action of his rebellious wrench bespoke the credence of unheard sacrilege. Never before, in a lost maze of untold eons, had a chosen one dared to demonstrate such blasphemy in the face of the cult's idolic deity. The girl cowered in unreasoning terror, helpless in the face of embattled acolyte's rage, her orchid tousled face smothered betwixt with her bulging bosom as she shut her curl lashed tightly, hoping to open them and find herself awakened from morbid nightmare. Yet the hand of destiny decreed her no such mercy. An antagonized pack of flaring shamans converging tensely upon her prostrate form were entangled all too lividly in the grim web of reality. Shuddering from the clammy torch of the shaman as they grapple with a subtle form, hands retching at her slender arms. Her bare body being molested by the midst of a labyrinth of orange smudged purple satin and mangled skull, shadowed an airy crimson glow. Her confused head reeled then clothed in a mist of enshrouding ebony as she lapsed beneath the protective sheet of unconsciousness to a land peach and resigned. Take hold of this rope, said the first soldier, and climb out from your pit, slut. Your presence is requested in another far deeper hellhole. Grigner slipped his right hand to his thigh, concealing a small opaque object beneath the folds of the G-string wrapped about his waist. Brine swelled in Grigner's cold jade squinting eyes, which grown accustomed to the gloom of the Stygian pools of ebony engulfing him, were bedazzled and blindly flickered by radiance cast forth by the second soul's resin torch. Tightly gripped in the second soul's right hand, opposite of the intermittent torch, was a large double-edged axe. A long leather-wound oaken handle transfixing the center as the weapon iron head. Adoring the torso with both of his sentries were thin yet sturdy hauberks, the breastplates which were woven tightly hemmed twines of reinforced silver braiding, cupping the soldier's feet with thick leather sandals. Wound about the shins, 2 inch below the knees, wrapped about the waist, were wide satin girdles with slender bladed poignards dangling loosely from them hilts. The hilts which feature scarlet encrusted gems. Resting upon the manes of the heads and reaching midway to the brows were smooth copper morions spiraling the lower portion of the helmet, were short up curved silver spikes with golden humps. Hump spired from top of each bassinet beneath their chins. Wound around their necks and draping the clad shoulder dangled regal purple satin cloaks, which flowed midways to the soldier's feet. Ooh, this is heavy reading, man. Hand over hand, feet brace against the dark walls and close the huge Grignr ascended from the moulding depths of the forlorn abyss. His swelled limbs stiff due to the boredom of a timeless inactivity, compounded by the musty atmosphere and jagged granite protuberance against his body craved for action. The opportunity now presented itself, serving the purpose of oiling his rusty joints and honing his dulled senses. He braced himself facing the second soldier. The sentry's stature was wildly exaggerated in the glaring of the flickering crescent cupex of his right fist. His eyes were wide open, in a slightly slanted ovalish glaze, enhanced in their sinister intensity by the hawk-bill curve of his nose and pale yellow PQ of his cheeks. I'm not even sure what half of these words means. I thought I knew English. Apparently I did not. And again, I haven't been pilfering a thesaurus. Place your hands behind your back, said the second soldier, as he raised his axe over his right shoulder blade and cast a wavering glance. We must bind your wrist to parry an attempt at escape. Be sure to make the knot a stout one, Broig. We wouldn't want our guest to take a leave of our guidance. Broig grasped Grignr's left wrist and reached for the barbarian's right wrist. Grignr wrenched his right arm free and swiveled to face Broig, reached beneath his loincloth with his right hand. The sentry grappled at his girdle for a second dagger, but recoiled short of his attention as Grignr's right arm swept to his gorge. The soldier went limp, his bobbing eyes rolling beneath the fluttering eyelids as a deep welt across his spouting gullet. Without lingering to observe the result of his effort, Grignr dropped to his knees. The second soldier's axe clefted over Grignr's head in a blith of silver ferocity, severing several scarlet locks of his scalp from his scalp, coming to rest in his fellow's stomach. The iron had crashed through the mail and flesh with splintering force, spilling a pool of crimson entrails over the granite paving. Before the sentry could wrench his axe free from his comrade's carcass, he found Grignr's massive hand clasped around his throat, choking the life from his clamped lungs. With a seal's ground, the accordion flexed his tightly corded biceps, forcing the grim-faced soldier to one knee. The sentry plunged his fist into Grignr's face, digging his grimy nails into the barbarian's flesh. Ejaculating a curse through rasping teeth, Grignr surged the bulk of his weight forward, bowling the besieged soldier upon his back. The sentry arm collapsed to his thighs, shuddering convulsively, his bulging eyes staring blindly from a bloated cherry-red face. Rising to his feet, Grignr shook the blood from his eyes, ruffling his surly red mane as swaying in the nighttime breeze. Stooping over the sprawled corpse of the first soldier, Grignr retrieved a small white object from a pool of congealed gore, snorting a ghastly bill of mirth. He once more concealed the tiny object beneath his loincloth. The tediously honed pelvis bone of the broken rodent. Returning his attention towards the second shoulder, Grignir returned to the task of attiring his limbs. To move about freely through the dim recesses of the castle would require the grotesque garb of its soldiery. Utilizing silence and stealth acquired in the untamed climbs of his childhood, Grignir slid through twisting corridors and winding stairways, lighting his way with the confiscated torch of his dispatched guardian. Knowing where his steps were leading to, Grignir meandered aimlessly in search of an exit from the chateau's dim confines. The wild blood coursing through his veins yearned for the undefined freedom of the livid wilderness lands. Upon coming to a fork in a passage, he shrieked. Voices accompanying by clinking footfalls discerned to his sensitive ears. From the left corridor, wishing to avoid contact, Grignir veered to the right passageway, if quested as to the purpose of his presence. His barbarous accent would reveal his identity, being that his attire was not that of the castle mercenary troops. In grim silence, Grignir treaded down the dimly lit corridor, a stalking panther creeping warily along on padded feet. After an immediately period of wandering through the dull corridors, no gasp to break the monotony of the cold grey walls, Grignir espied a small winding stairway descending to the flight of arched granite slabs. Through the posterior, Grignir was confronted by a short hallway leading to a tall, arched wooden doorway. Halting before the teeming portal, Grignir rested his shaggy head sideways against the barrier, detecting no sound from within. He grasped the looped metal handle of the door. His arm surging with tremendous effort of bulging muscle, yet the door would not budge. Retrieving his axe from where he had sheathed it, beneath his girdle he hefted it in his mighty hands with an appeasing grunt, and wheeling one of his blackened edge into the crack between the portals of the portal and its iron-rimmed sill. Bracing his sandal right foot against the roughly hewn heaven wall, teeth tightly clenched, Grignir levered the oaken haft, employing it as a lever whereupon to pry open the barrier. The leather wound hilt to its uttermost limits of endurance, the massive portal swung open in a grinding of snapped latch and rusty iron hinges. Ooh! Detecting a faint clicking sound, Grignir spun to his left side with the speed of a striking cobra, landing harshly upon his back, torch and axe lowly clattering to the floor in a morass of sparks and flames. An elm-woven board leapt from collapsed flooring, clashing against the jagged flooring and spewing a shower of orange and yellow sparks over Grignir's starlit face. Rising uneasy to his feet, the half-stunned accordion glared down the gruesome arm of death he has unwittingly sprung. Mirifk, Jeez. And I thought I was bad with names. If not for his keen auditory organs and lightning steel reflexes, Grignr would have been groping through the shadow-held pits of the Grim Reaper. He had unknowingly stumbled upon an ancient, long-forgotten booby trap. A mistake which would have stunted the perusal of longevity of one less agile. A mechanism similar in type to that of a miniature catapult was concealed beneath two collapsible sections of granite flooring. The arm of the device was 4 feet long, boasting a razor-like cleats at irregular intervals along with its face, which was skewered the luckless body of its would-be victim. Grignr had stepped on a concealed catch, which released a small metal latch beneath the two granite sections, causing them to fall inward, and thereby loosened a spiked arm of death they precariously held in. So he stepped on a plate, and a spiked, spring-loaded spike thing flung out from the wall. Okay. Partially out of curiosity and partially out of an inordinate fear of becoming pincushion to a possible second trap, Grignr plunged his torch into the exposed gap in the floor. The floor of a second chamber stood out 7 feet below the glare. Tossing his torch through the aperture, Grignr grasped the side of a jarring tidal, dropping down. Glancing about the room, Grignr discovered that he had descended into the palace mausoleum. Rectangular stone crypts cluttered the floor at evenly placed intervals. The tops of the enclosure were plated with thick layers of virgin blood, while the sides were plated with white ivory, at one time sparkling, but now grown dingy through the passageway of the race of all-encompassing modern time, featuring at the head of each sarcophagus in tarnished silver was expungusively carved likeness of his rotting inhabitants. A dimly lit atmosphere pervaded the air of the chamber, which sealed the enclosure for an unknown period had grown thick and stale, intermingling with the curdled current. That was a repugnant stench of slowly moulding flesh, creeping its ever slowly but surely through minute cracks in the numerous walls due to embalming of the bodies of the flesh decayed at a much slower than normal rate. Yet the nauseous odour was none the less repellent. I'm gonna need something more to drink. I'm parched. Towering over Grignr's head was the trap he released. The mechanism of the miniature's catapult was cluttered with mildew and cobwebs. Notwithstanding these relics of antiquity, the effect remained unimpinged to the right of the trap. Wound a short stairway through a recess in the ceiling, a concealed entrance leading to a mausoleum, for which a catapult had obviously been erected, as a silent, relentless guardian. Climbing up the sides of the device, Gerigner set to task of resetting its mechanism. In the event that a search was organized, it would prove well to leave no evidence of his presence open to wandering eyes. Besides, it might serve to dwindle the size of an opposing force. Descending from his perch, Gringnir was startled by a faintly muffled scream of a horrified desperation. His hair prickled yawkishly in disorganized clumps along his scalp. A cold dance along the length of his spinal cord. No mortal barrier, human or otherwise, was capable of arousing the numbing sensation of fear inside Grignir's smouldering soul. However, he was overwrought by the forces of the barbarian, instinctive fear of the supernatural. His mighty thews had always served to adequately conquer any tangible foe. But the intangible was something distant and terrible. Dim, horrifying tales passed by the word of mouth over glimmering campfires and skins of wine had more than once served the purpose of chilling the marrowed core of its sturdy limb bones. Yet the scream contained a strangely human quality, unlike that which Gringnir would have imagined coming from the lungs of a demon spirit, making Gringnir take short, nervous strides of advancing to the sarcophagus from which the sound was issuing. Clenching his teeth in an attempt to steal his jangled nerves, Gringnir slid the engraved slab from the vault with a sharp rasp of grinding stone. Another long-drawn cry of terror infested anguish met the barbarian, scoring like the shrill piping of a demented banshee, piercing the inner fibers of his superstitious brain with primitive dread and awe. I swear, this is sounding more and more like Conan the Barbarian. Stooping over the SB of the tomb's contents, the glittering accordion's nostrils were singed by the scorching aroma of a mouldering corpse, long shut up and fermenting the same putrid scent which permeated the entire chamber, though multiplied to a much more concentrated dosage. The shriveled, leathery package of crumbling bones and dried, flaking flesh offered no resistance, but remained a fixed position of purulent vigilance, watching over its time abode from hollowing, gaping sockets. The tortured cries were not coming from the tomb, but from the hidden depths below. Pulling the reeking corpse from its resting place, Grignir tossed it to the floor in a broken, mangled heap. Upon the side of the crypt's bottom was attached a series of tiny hinges, while running parallel along the opposite side of a convex railing of protuberance, laid as to appear as part of the interior surface of the sarcophagus. Rising the slab upon the bronze hinges, its bronze hinges long removed from the gaze of human eyes. Grignir perceived a scene which caused his blood to smoulder, not unlike bubbling molten lava. Directly below him, a whimpering female lay stretched upon the smooth surface of a marble altar. A pack of greasy-faced shaman clustered around her. A tight circular formation crouched over the girl was a tall, pot-bellied priest, his face dominated by a disgusting open mouth, grimaced with a sadistic glee suspended from the acolyte's clenched right hand was a carved oval-faced mallet, which he waved menacingly over the girl's shadow face, in an incoherent gibberish flow from his grinning, thick-lipped mouth. In the face of the amorphous, broad-breathed female stretched out alluring before his gaping eyes. The universal whim of nature filling a plea of despair inside his white-hot soul, Grignir acted the only manner he could perceive. Giving vent to a hoarse throat-rending battle cry, Grignir plunged into the midst of a stolid shaman, thought simmering in his left hand, an axe twirling in his right. A gaunt skull-faced priest standing at the far side of the altar clutched desperately at his throat, coughing furiously as he attempted to catch his breath. Lurching helplessly to and fro, the acolyte pitched headlong in the gleaming base of a massive jade idol, writhing, writhing antagonizingly against the hideous image of a foam flecking his chalk-white lips. The priest struggled helplessly, the victim of an epileptic seizure. Startled by the barbarian's stunning appearance, the chronic thit of the fellow and the fear of Grignir might be the advent guard of conquering force dedicated to the cause of destroying the degenerate cult. The shaman momentarily lost their composure, giving vent to heedless pandemonium. The priest fell easy prey to Grignir's sweeping arch of crimson death and maiming destruction. The acolyte performing the sacrifice took a vicious blow to the stomach, hands clutching vital and several spinal cord as he sprawled over the altar. The disorganized priest lurched and staggered with split skulls, dismembered limbs and spewing entrails before the enraged Encordian's relentless onslaught. The holes of the maimed and dying reverberated against the walls of the tiny chamber. A chorus of hell fraught the spear and granite floor ran red with blood. The entire chamber was encompassed in the heat of raw, savage butchery as Grignir luxuriated the grips of primitive, beastly bloodlust. Presently all was silent, save from the ebbing groans of the sinking shamans, and Grignir's heavy breath accompanied by several gutsy curses. And the well had run dry. No more lambs remained for the slaughter. The rampaging steed of death had taken of Grignir's the moment, left his barbarian free to the exploitation of other perusals. Towering over his head was the misshapen image of the cult's hideous deity, Argon. The fantastic size of the idol, in consideration of its being pure jade, was the cause the sense of any man to stagger and reel. Yet this was not the case for the behemoth. He had paid only casual notice of the incredible fact while retrieving the whole of his attention upon the jewel protruding from the idol's soul socket, his masterfully cut faucets emitting blinding rays of hypnotizing beauty. After all, a man cannot sink from a heavily guarded place, while burdened down by the intense bulk of squatting statue, proving of course that idol can even be hefted, which in fact was beyond the reaches of Grignar's coursing stamina. On the other hand, the jewel, gigantic as it was, would not present a hindrance of any mean concern. "Help me, please, I can make it worth your while," pleaded a soft, anguishly stewing voice, wafting over Grignar's shoulder as he plucked the dull red emerald from its roots. Turning Grignar's face to the female that had lured him into the bloodbath, but whom had become all but forgotten in the heat of battle. "You," ejaculated the Encordian in a pleased tone. "I thought that I had seen the last of you at the tavern." But verily I was mistaken. Grignar advanced to the grips of the female, entrancing stare, severing the golden chains that held her captive upon the altars of highly polished face of ornamental limestone. Wait, limestone is not the same as marble and granite. As Grignar lifted the girl from the altar, her arms wound dexterously around his neck, soft and smooth against his harsh exterior. "Art thou pleased with what we have, with that we have chanced to meet again?" Gringly merely voiced a slight grunt, returning to the damsel's embrace, while he smothered her thin, delicate lips between the coursing protrusion of his reeking maw. Smothering her trim, delicate lips between the coursing protrusions of his shrieking maw. Oh God. "Let us take a leave from this wretched chamber," started Grignar as he placed the female upon her feet. She swooned a moment, causing Grignar to give her support and regain her stance. "Are thou able to find your way through the accursed passage of this castle? Mirific, every one of the corridors of this damned place are identical." Oh. Right. "Are those able to find your way through the accursed passage of this castle, Mifric? Every one of the corridors of the place are damned identical." "I was at one time slave of the Prince Agathin. His clammy touch sent a sour swill through my belly, but my effort reaped a harvest. I gained the pig's liking, thereby he allowed me to freedom of the palace. It was through this means that I eventually managed to escape of the palace. It was a simple matter of seducing the sentry at the western gate. His thrust found him with a dagger thrust his ribs. The wench stated whimsically. "What were you doing in the tavern when I discovered you?" asked Grignar as he lifted the female through the opening of the mausoleum. "I had sought to lay low from the palace guard as they conducted a search for me. The tavern was seldom frequented by the palace guards, and my identity was unknown to the common soldier. It was through the disturbance you caused that the palace guards were attracted to the tavern. I was dragged away shortly after you were escorted to the palace." "What are you called, female?" "Carthina, daughter of Micardos, Duke of Barvego, whose lands border along the northwestern fringes of Gorsum. I was paid as homage to Agafim upon his 38 years, husked the femme. And I am called a barbarian, grunted Grignir in disgusted tone. Aye, the ways of our civilization are in many ways warped and distorted. But what is your calling? She inquired bustily. Grignir of Ecordia. Ah, I have heard of Ecordia, the hill country to the far east of the Norgolian Empire. I have also heard Agafim curse your land more than once when his troops were routed by the unaccustomed mountains and gorges, saith she. Aye, my people are not tarnished by the petty luxuries and bulbs. They remain fierce and unconquerable with the native climes. After reaching the hidden panels at the head of the stairway, Grignir was at loss in regards to its operation. His fiercest heaves were as pebbles against the burnished armour. Cathina pressed a small symbol included within the elaborate design upon the panel, whereupon it slid open into the cleft of the wall. How did you become the victim of those Christ shaman? Questioned Grignir as he escorted Cathina through the piles of rumage on the left side of the trap. By Agathim's order, I was thrusted into a secluded cell to await the passing of his sentence, but by some means the priest of Argon acquired a set of keys to the cell. They slew the guard and placed me God placed over me and abducted me to the chamber which you chance upon the sacrifice. Your hellspawn cult demanded a sacrifice once every 3 moons upon its full journey through the heavens. They were startled by your unannounced appearance through the fear that you have been sent by Agafim. The prince would surely have submitted them to the most ghastly of tortures if he had discovered their unfaithfulness to Sargon, his bastard deity. Many of the partakers of the ritual were high nobles and high trustees of the inner palace. Agahim's pitted wrath would have been unparalleled. They have no more fear of Agafim now. Alright, they have no more fear of Agahim now, bellowed Grignir, deep mirthful tone, as a gleeful smirk upon his face. I have seen that I have been delivered from his vengeance. Engrossed by Cathina's grateful strides, conversation, Grignir failed to take note of the footfall rapidly approaching behind him. As he swung aside the arched portal linking the chamber from the corridors beyond, a maddened, bloodlusting screech reverberated his eardrums. Seemingly utilizing the speed of thought, Grignir swiveled to face his unknown foe. With gaping eyes and widening jaws, Grignir raised his axe above his surly mane, but he was too late. With wobbling knees and swimming head, the priest that had lapsed into an epileptic seizure rose unsteadily to his feet. While enacting his choking fit, riding agony, the shaman was overlooked by Grignir. The barbarian had mistaken the seizure for death through force of the acolyte, allowing the priest to avoid his stinging blade. The sight that met the priest's inflamed eyes nearly served to sprawl him upon the floor once more. The sacrificial sat in grim blood splattered. The silence all around him broke only by the occasional yelp and howls of maimed and butchered fellows. Above his head rose the hideous idol, its empty socket holding the shaman's enfurbished, infuriated gaze. His eyes stone gazily upon realization of his pillage and blasphemy. Due to the high accessibility of following the teacher, the priest was transformed into a raving maniac, bent solely upon wreaking vengeance. With lips curled and quivering, with the crust foam dripping from them, the acolyte drew a long, wicked-looking jewel hilted scimitar from his silver girdle and fled through the aperture in the ceiling, uttering a faintly perceptible ceremonial gibberish. Wait, 17? Chapter 17 and a half? Oh, okay. A wide sweeping scimitar swung towards Grinder's head in a shadow blur of motion. With axe raised above his head, Grinder prepared to parry the blow, while gaping wide-eyed, wide-open-mouthed, perplexed. Suddenly a sharp snap resounded behind the frothing shaman. The scimitar halfway through its fatal sweep. A drop from a quivering, nerveless hand, clattering harmlessly to the stone edge, cutting its screech short with a bubbling red mouthed gurgle, and lacerated acolyte staggered under the pressure of released springboard. After a moment of hopeless struggle, the shaman buckled sprawling face down in a widening pool of blood and entrails, his regal purple robe bending enhancingly in the swirling streams of crimson. "Mirifk, I thought I killed the last of those dogs," muttered Grignr in a half-apathic state. "Nay, Grignr, you doubtlessly grew careless while giving vent to your lust. But let us not tarry any longer, lest we vex the text of their fates. The paths leading to freedom will soon be barred." The wretched cry must certainly have attracted unwanted attention, the wench mused. "By which direction shall we pursue our flight?" "Up the stair and down the corridor. A short distance is the concealed entrance to a tunnel seldom used by other than the prince, and known to a few others saves the palace royalty. It's used mainly by the prince when he wishes to take leave of the palace in secret. It is not always to the prince's best interest to leave the chateau in public view. Even while under the heavy guard, he is often assaulted by hurtling stones and rotting fruit. The commoners have little love for him," lectured the near lady. "It's amazing that they would ever let a pig like him become the ruler. I should imagine that his people rise up and crucify him like the dog he is." "Alas, Grignr is not as simple as that. His soldiers are well paid by him. So long as he keeps his wages, they will carry out his damned wishes. The crude implement of the common folk would never stand up to an onslaught of forged blades and protective armour. They would be going to their own slaughter," stated Carthenia to a confused but angered Grignr, as he topped the hallway. "Yet how can you bear to live under such oppression?" "I would soon die under the sword. I would soon die beneath the sword, and to live under such a dog's command." Added Grignr as the pair stalked down the direction opposite which Grignr has come. "But all men are not of the same mould that you are born of. They choose to live as they are, to sow the filthy necks from the shopping blocks," returned Carthena in a disgusted tone as she cast a pious glance towards the stalwart figure, at her side, whose left arm wound dexterously around a slim waist. His slowly waning torch casting the images of intermingling wisps of dangle from his left hand. Presently Carthena came upon a panel concealed amongst other granite slabs, and discernible only by the burned out crescent above it. As I pushed the crescent aside, pushed the panel inwards. Catherine motioned the panel she was referring to and twisted the crescents in a counterclockwise motion. Grigner appraised his right shoulder against the walling, concentrated the force with bulk against it. The slab gradually swung inwards, with a slight grinding sound. Katrina stooped beneath Grigner's corded arms, and crawled upon all fours into the passage. Beyond, Grigner followed after, easing the slab back to its into its place. Oh. Winding before the pair was a dark, musty tunnel, exhibiting tangled spider webs from its ceiling to wall, and an oozing sickly slime running lazily upon its floor. Hanging from the shipped wall upon Grigner's right side was a half-mouldered corpse, its grey flickering arms held in place by rusty iron manacles. Carthena flinched back into Grigner's arms at the sight of the leering sat in an ugly distorted grimace, staring horribly at her hollowed gaping sockets. This alcove must have been used by Agathim as slaughter chamber. I wonder how many of his enemies have disappeared into these haunts never to be heard from again, pondered the hulking brute. Let's flee before we also are caught in Agnahim's ghastly clutches. The exit from this tunnel cannot be very far from here, said Carthena, with a slight sob to her voice as she sagged in Grigner's encompassing embrace. It would be best to be finished here in the corridor as soon as possible. Why do you flinch from the sight of death so? Murphy, I've seen so much death this day, without exhibiting such emotion, exclaimed Grigner as he led the trembling form along the dingy confines. The man hanging from the wall was Dionata. He had committed the folly of showing his affection for me in front of Agathim. He never meant any harm by his action. At this, Carthena broke into slow, steady whimpering, choking her voice with gasping sobs. There was never anything between us, yet Agham did this to him. The beast made demons of hell and deepest haunts clay away his wretched flesh for this merciless act, she prayed. I detect you felt more from this fellow than you wished to let on. But enough of this. We can talk of such matters once we are free to do so. With this, Grigner lifted the grieving female to her feet and strode onwards, down the corridor, supporting the bulk of her weight with his surging left arm. Presently a dim light was perceptibly filtering into the tunnel, casting a dim reddish hue upon the mouldy wall of the passage grim confines. Carthena had ceased her whimpering and partially regained her composure. The tunnel's end must be nearing. Rays of sunlight are being seeped into. Grigner clammed his right hand over Carthena's mouth and with a slight struggle pulled her over to the shadows at the right hand wall of the path, while at the same time thrusting his torch beneath the overhanging stone to smother its flicking rays. "Be silent! I can hear footfalls approaching through the tunnels," growled Grignr in hushed tones. "All that you hear are the horses' corral and Ferran of the tunnel. There's a further sign we're nearing our goal." All that you hear is less than I hear. I hear footsteps coming towards us." "Silence yourself, and we may find out who we are being brought into contact with." "I doubt that Annie would have thought of yet searching for this passage for us. The advantage of the prize will be upon our side," Grignr warned. Carthena cast her eyes downwards, ceasing any further pursuit towards conversation, an irritating habit which she had gained with amazing proficiency. Two figures came into the pair's view from around a turn in a tunnel. They were clothed in luxuriant silks and rambling on in conversation, while ignorant of their crouching foes, waiting in ambush ahead. "That barbarian dog is cringing beneath the weight of the lash at this moment. Sire, he shall cause no more disturbance." "Aye, so it's with Annie who dares to cross the path of Argon, the chosen one," said the second man. But the peasants are showing signs of growing unrest. They are complaining they cannot feed their families while burdened with your taxes. "I shall teach those sluts the meaning of humility, order an immediate increase upon the taxes. They dared to question my sovereign authority. Ha ha! They shall soon learn what the true oppression can be. I will." A shoe-doovered bulk leapt from behind a jutting promontory as it brought down a double-edged axe. With sepid of a striking thought, the noble sagged lifeless to the ground. Skull split to the teeth. Grignr gasped as he observed the bisected face, serving his leering death agony. It was Agafund, the dead man's comrade. Having recovered from his shock, drew a jewel-encrusted dagger from beneath his fold of his robe, and lunged towards the barbarian's back. Grignr spun at the sound of being smashed from behind and smashed down his crimson axe once more. His antagonist lunged, howling into a stream of stagnant green water, grasping a spouting stump that once had been a wrist. Grignr raised his axe above his head and prepared to finish the incomplete job, but was deterred from his throw by frenzied screech from behind. Carthena leapt to the head of the writhing figure, plunging a smouldering torch into its agonizing face. The holes increased with a horrid intensity, stifled by the sizzling of roasting flesh, then died down until the man was reduced to a blubbering mass of quivering, insensate flesh. I had to. It was Agathim. I had to, she exclaimed. "So Argon should be more careful with his right-hand man," added Grignr, a smug grin upon his lips. "But to hell with Argon for now. The stench is becoming bothersome to me." That Grignr grasped Carthena around the waist, leading her around the bend into the cave and into the open. A ball of feral red was rising through the mist of the eastern horizon, dissipating the slinking shadow of the night. A coral stood before the pair, enclosing two grazing mares. Gregner reached into a weighted down leather pouch dangling at his side, and drew forth the scintillant red emerald which he had obtained from the bloated idol, raising it towards the sun. We shall do well with this bauble, eh? The Eye of Argon, oh Kala, this is a gem. At this, a gem gave off a blinding glow. The dribble thought of Gregner's fingers in a slimy red ooze. Gregner stepped back, pushing Carthena behind him. The droplets of slimy slow converged into a pulsating jelly-like mass. A single opening transfixed the blob, forming into a leech-like maw. The hideous transgressor of nature flowed towards the Gregner, a trail of greenish slime lingering behind it. The single gap puckered, repeatedly emitting a ghastly sucking sound. Oh, it was a trap, eh? Gregner spread his legs into a battle stance, stealing his quivering thews for battle royal with a thing he knew not how to fight. Carthena wound her arms around her protector's neck. Kill it! Kill it! While her entire body trembled. The thing was almost upon Gregner when he buried his axe into the grisly maw. It passed through the blob and clanged upon the ground. Gregner drew his axe back with a film of yellow-green slime clinging to the blade. The thing was seemingly unaffected. Then they started to sluice up his leg. The hairs upon his nape stood on end from the slimy feel of the thing's bully bulk. The nauseous suckling sound became louder as Gregner felt blood being drawn from his body, with each hiss of hideous pluck increasing in size, Gregner shook his foot about madly, attempted to dislodge the blob, but it clung like a leech, still feeding upon his rapidly draining life fluid. He grasped with his hand, trying to rip it off, but found his hand entangled in a sticky glue-like substance. The slimy thing continued its puckering, now having grown the size of Gregner's leg from his vampiric feast. Gregner began to reel and stagger under the blob, his chalk-white face in a faltering muscle, attesting to the gigantic loss of blood. Carthena slipped from Gregner in a death-like faint, murmuring chilling scream upon red lips. In a final desperation, Gregner grasped a smouldering torch upon the ground and plunged it into the reeking maw of travesty. A shrouded passage through the thing Gregner felt, blackness and closing upon his eyes. But he could feel his grip lessening as a hideous gurgling sound erupted from his writhing maw. A jelly-like mass began to bubble like a vat of boiling tar, as quivering passes down its entire form. With a sloshing plop, the thing fell to the ground, evaporating into thick scarlet cloud until it retained its original size. It remained thus for a moment as the puckered maw took the shape of a protruding red eyeball, a pupil which seemed to unravel before the tale of creation. Now a shapeless mass slithered from the quagmires of the stigmatic pool of time, only to degenerate into a leprosy of avaricious lust. In the fleeting moment, the grim mystery of life revealed before Gregner's ensnared gaze. The eyeball's glare turned to a sudden plea of mercy, a plea for the whole of humanity. Then the blob began to quiver in violent convulsion. The eyeball shattered into 1,000 tiny fragments and evaporated in a curling wisp of scarlet mist. The very ground below the thing began to reverberate, and swallowing it with a belch. The thing was gone forever. All that remained was a dark red splotch upon the face of the earth, blotching things up. Shaking his head, his shaggy mane, to clear the jumbled fragment from his mind. Grigners tossed limp female over his shoulder, mounting one of the disgruntled mares, and leading the other weary, scarred barbarian throttled slowly into the horizon, to become a tiny pinpoint in a filtered file swirl of blue mist, leaving the noble soldiers and peasants to replace the missing monarch. Long live the king. Oh, jeez. That's quite a handful. Oh boy. Okay.